When you think of a top-tier Pokemon, you probably envision them in their prime, at the height of their power and competitive success. But what about the struggle they went through to reach that peak? Nobody ever talks about that. Many of these Pokemon suffered from identity crisis in past generations. They didn't know who they were yet. And they had to fill awkward competitive niches in these early games just to justify existing at all. It wasn't until later, when the shifting metagame around them or certain buffs to their abilities or movesets made them what we know them as today. So why don't we talk about these Pokemon before they were good, before they were top tier? Because not every Pokemon was born great. Some of them had to work for it. And isn't the struggle so much more interesting than the end result? Less than 1 day remains for the Iron Mugulis plush. Get it urgently while you can, folks. Thank you. First up we have Scizor, an icon of competitive Pokemon that rose to superstardom in Generation 4, with its powerful Bug-Steel typing, which only has one weakness to fire. Excellent stats, and the incredible combination of Bullet Punch and Technician. Scizor is well known. Scizor had many generations in a row of competitive excellence, along with one of the most powerful Mega Forms in the game. But what about before this? Because Scizor debuted back in Generation 2, before abilities even existed, before Technician existed, which is its main reason for rising to superstardom. Was Scizor good enough to achieve anything competitively back then, without its most valuable options? Well, it's certainly suffering from some severe shortcomings in its debut. It is still the foundation of a solid Pokemon. The typing is amazing, the stats are amazing, especially the attack, but Scizor suffers in Gen 2 from a pretty shallow move pool. It does not have options like Superpower, U-Turn, Bullet Punch. Its physical move pool is quite lacking. You got Hidden Power Bug as your most powerful option for Stab, which is something almost everything in the game gets. That's nothing special at all. As a physical attacker, Scizor is ineffective into common enemies like Skarmory and Steelix, and outclassed by other options. Even Heracross is a superior Bug-type physical attacker and a more desirable option. Was Scizor doing anything in Gen 2 at all? Well, Scizor's main purpose is on fairly gimmicky Baton Pass strategies, because unlike Heracross and other physical attackers, Scizor does have a good combination of boosting moves and Baton Pass to transfer those boosts to allies. And Gen 2 is a rare metagame where Baton Pass is a legal to use move. So Scizor can be a pretty excellent Pokemon on this specific style of team. It has both Swords Dance and Agility. Swords Dance boosts attack, Agility boosts speed. This is pretty fantastic when passing to a recipient like Marowak or even Snorlax. And what's nice about Scizor compared to some other Baton Pass Pokemon is that it has all these boosts and it's a great defensive typing. And a high attack itself, it can actually attack things with Hidden Power Bug and do good damage if it needs to, if the situation calls for it. I don't love Baton Pass teams in Gen 2, but if you are going to run one, Scizor is one of the better reasons to. It's not quite OU status because this is not such a ubiquitous thing in the metagame, but it does have its metagame purpose on these teams. Now what about Gen 3? In Gen 3, Scizor is still outclassed by Heracross as an all-purpose physical attacker. Heracross has the more powerful Mega Horn, better physical moves overall, and the superior offensive ability Guts. Scizor on the other hand is still suffering from a shallow move pool. The best it can do is still just Hidden Power on the attacking side for the most part. It has the new ability Swarm, which Heracross also has as an option. At a third or less of your max HP, you deal bonus Bug-type damage, but Heracross has Mega Horn, a massive Bug-type attack, and you're out here stuck with Hidden Power Bug, so not a fantastic get for Scizor. Even in the department of Baton Passing, Scizor is outclassed by other options. You have Ninjask now, who's superior Speed Passer. Agility Pass is better achieved on Zapdos as well, and even in the department of Swords Dance Pass, you have options like Celebi. And even Smeargle, who can do Spore Dragon Dance Pass. So Scizor is struggling a little bit, but there is something Scizor can do in Gen 3. Scizor can be a bit of a comeback gamer, because Scizor has the move Reversal as a new option. Reversal is an attack that deals more damage the lower HP you have. So if you combo this with Endure, which is a support move that allows you to survive any incoming attack on 1 HP, you have the lowest HP possible, and therefore Reversal has its maximum power of 200. And with 200 power on Reversal, you can sweep teams very easily. Now I know what you're thinking. Heracross has this option too, and Heracross is generally a much better Pokemon, but there's a crucial difference between the two. Scizor is a Steel type, meaning it is immune to Sandstorm damage. Heracross cannot do a reversal sweep like this unless it clears the Sandstorm from the field, because if it endures, it will just die to Sandstorm damage. But Scizor doesn't need to do that. Scizor can do a reversal sweep while Sandstorm is up. And that's actually pretty valuable. It's one of the few Pokemon that can do such a thing. So this Scizor set uses Agility to gain speed, a Lychee Berry to gain attack when you're at low HP, enhancing your damage further, and Endure to survive the hit necessary to activate this combo. Then with the coverage of Reversal as a fighting type option and Hidden Power Ghost to hit Gengar and other such ghost types that are immune to fighting, and perhaps even psychic types resistant to fighting. This can actually be a viable win condition. Players like H-Clat have used this and won with it. It's a real thing. The problem with it is that it's a little bit obvious what you're going with when you use Scizor, because it's kind of the only thing it can do, so a lot of players will just not play into Endure. They'll know that you're going to do that and then just burn you or switch around so that you can't bring your health low enough to make Reversal really powerful. But if maybe you're up against somebody that has no choice but to attack you, or they're not familiar with the set, this can work. This can get you somewhere and sweep a game. So that's what Scizor does in Gen 3 pretty much, and it's a UUBL ranked Pokemon again. I think it's even less meta relevant than it was in Gen 2. Unfortunately, Scizor is pretty damn rarely seen. It is not really a common part of the metagame, but it does have this, and this is something. This is genuinely pretty cool. It's not the kind of thing you're going to see on every team, but on the right team, it can work. So these were the awkward years for Scizor, and of course in the very next generation, this would change completely as they gave Scizor a bunch of new options. Not only the ability Technician, but the crucial new moveset option of Bullet Punch, coverage like Superpower, U-Turn for pivoting and momentum, even options like Bug Bite and Roost to just have more standard attacks and some sort of healing. Just push Scizor to new heights, and then later it got Defog and gained a Mega Form. You know the story, but not many people know about the early gen Scizor and how it was kind of a weird Pokemon that didn't achieve much. But it's interesting the few things it can achieve, and I actually like Gen 3 Scizor. I think it's a pretty fun Pokemon and a unique way to use the Pokemon. Up next is Clefable. Clefable is a top tier Pokemon in many generations. Ever since Gen 6, this Pokemon has been loving life when it was converted from a normal type into a fairy type. Even though its stats are pretty average, the combination of fairy typing, the ability Magic Guard, and its outstanding move pool full of every attack you can imagine and every utility move you can imagine, Clefable just rose to the top, and it is still great in Gen 9. But what about before that? Well, even before that, Clefable was good in Gen 4 as a normal type with Magic Guard, but Clefable's existence wasn't once so fantastic. Back in Generation 1 when it debuted, Clefable was a weird Pokemon. There was of course no Magic Guard yet to make it broken, it had no ability, and Clefable didn't really do anything that other Pokemon couldn't do better. This is a normal type with a pretty nice utility move pool, a lot of different attacks, but it doesn't excel in any area in particular. And competitors like Chansey and Snorlax outclass Clefable pretty much in every way. But it's not all bad for Clefable. Back in Gen 1, being a normal type is such a buff, and being a normal type with options like Body Slam, Hyper Beam, and Thunder Wave at least makes you decent. Down in the UU tier, Pokemon like Chansey, Snorlax, and Tauros are not allowed at all, so Clefable naturally is the next best thing, and Clefable kinda dominates this metagame. In this lower power level, Clefable's Body Slam and Hyper Beam are actually very threatening, despite its lower than average attack stat. And its great selection of special attacks allow it to pose quite a bit of a threat to common switch-ins too. In the very next game, Gen 2, Clefable actually got a little bit more interesting. In this game, Clefable is ranked UUBL, so it's a bit too powerful for the UU meta game. And Clefable gained a new option that I think made it a little bit awesome, if you ask me. That option is Belly Drum. Now, Belly Drum Clefable sounds completely ridiculous if you think of Clefable in its modern form, who is usually a special attacker, but back in Gen 2, aggressive boosts like Belly Drum were hard to come by. Not many Pokemon get this move, and Clefable, thanks to Belly Drum, can actually be incredibly threatening. Clefable sets itself apart from Snorlax, who is also able to use Belly Drum with its higher speed stat and access to unique utility moves. One of the most powerful being Encore. Encore is a move that forces the enemy to utilize the move they just used, basically trapping them and making them useless. And Encore can be a fantastic option to ruin the enemy and then create a free turn for yourself to Belly Drum and sometimes win the game off that. Clefable has nice complementary coverage for its stab return in the form of Shadow Ball, which is able to hit ghost types like Gengar and Misdreavus, who are immune to normal. And you also have Fire Blast if you want to pose a bit more of a threat to Skarmory or Steelix or other steel types trying to stop you. This is not the most common Pokemon in the world in Gen 2, but I think it's very cool. And it's a damn scary Pokemon in the right situation. It certainly has unique ways to force its way through and win a game that nothing else quite has. Now, the transition from Gen 2 to 3 was pretty unexciting for Clefable, unfortunately. The new ability bestowed upon this Pokemon was Cute Charm. Cute Charm just grants a 1 in 3 chance of infatuating a Pokemon of the opposite gender if they make contact. Not a great ability at all. Pretty bad, in fact. Especially compared to the new abilities that those old competitors got. Snorlax has Thick Fat and Immunity now, both outstanding. Blissey has Natural Cure. Tauros has Intimidate. Even Kangaskhan has you beat with Early Bird. And unfortunately, Clefable's utility is feeling much less useful here, as even something like Licky Tongue is more useful. Licky Tongue has access to Knockoff, which Clefable doesn't. So if you're going to use an average normal type, Licky Tongue might be a little bit more useful. You still have the combination of Belly Drum. They gave this guy Meteor Mash, which is interesting. And you have Calm Mind now, which is a good new option, but the stats are just a bit too below average and the competition is so stiff. The Clefable is much worse in Gen 3 than it was in the previous 2 generations. Down in the RU tier is where Clefable settled, and then in this lower power level, Clefable can function well as a utility Pokemon, where its stats are not as much of a detriment, but in the more popular competitive tiers, Clefable is not having a fantastic time. And of course, we know that in the very next generation, this guy got Magic Guard and Stealth Rock, and even Knockoff, and then it's shot to the moon eventually, as a result of that. I think the rise of Clefable after this largely goes to show how powerful the ability Magic Guard is. A relatively unexciting Pokemon became a top-tier force, just a simple new ability addition. Makes you wonder, what if Licky Tongue received Magic Guard? What if Sudowoodo received Magic Guard? We'd be in a whole different reality, wouldn't we? But Clefable was the one that received it. Early Gen Clefable is an interesting Pokemon that is a bit of a jack-of-all-trades, master of none. Its move pool is incredibly diverse, but its ability back in Gen 3 was basically useless. At least in Gen 1 and 2, Clefable has some value due to the vastness of its move pool and some small differences with its competitors in the same typing. Now, what about Gyarados, a Pokemon classic, a Gen 1 Pokemon that really saw competitive success for the first time in Gen 3, where it gained the excellent new ability Intimidate, significantly enhancing its viability. And with the new boosting option of Dragon Dance as well as a powerful physical move pool, Gyarados turned into a competitively relevant option on physical offense teams. In Gen 4, Gyarados shot up to superstardom as maybe the most powerful boost sweeper in Gen 4, thanks to the new physical special split and physical waterfall, enhancing Gyarados' coverage and possible things it can threaten. Gyarados maintained OU viability in Gen 5 and received a pretty great Mega Form that remained relevant in the Gen 6 and 7 metagames. But what about before this? What about before it saw competitive success? Because this is a Gen 1 Pokemon. And in Gen 1, Gyarados was an awkward Pokemon, a strange Pokemon. Now, Gyarados isn't all bad in Gen 1. It does have very good stats, pretty solidly distributed everywhere, good bulk, okay speed, and a very high attack stats. But Gyarados is suffering from some identity crisis. This guy has no physical stab in Gen 1, as Water is a special attacking type here, and It has 0 flying type attacks in its entire moveset. Gyarados has a really vast attacking move pool with options like Body Slam, Blizzard, Thunderbolt, Hydro Pump, Hyper Beam. It has a significant amount of different attacks, but this doesn't end up being that much of a benefit in the Gen 1 OU metagame. Despite having high attack, the lack of good physical moves, relying mostly on Body Slam and Hyper Beam, actually leaves you vulnerable to Chansey and Snorlax, who can pretty easily switch in against you, stomach all your special attacks, and then cripple you completely with Thunder Wave, or Thunderbolt if they're running it. Gyarados seems to have the toolset of a Wall Breaker, but it's not great for a Wall Breaker to completely thud against the 2 most common defensive Pokemon in the entire tier. Gyarados can get some entry points against Earthquake users, and it's a rare special attacker that can switch in on Earthquake, which has its value, but that's about the only thing it can switch in on safely. It struggles to come in against any half-decent special attacker. It tends to get very easily worn down, and it's also suffering from its times for electric weakness, since electric is such a common coverage type and so many things threaten Gyarados with lethal force as a result. Gyarados ends up residing in the UU tier in Gen 1, where it is an excellent Pokemon thanks to all these things going for it. In fact, it feels much better than many of the other UU ranked Pokemon available. But this is still a little bit of an embarrassing debut for Gyarados, and you can see the awkward identity of it, not really leaning into its strengths as best as it could. In Gen 2, Gyarados had even less reason to exist than it did in Gen 1. At least Hidden Power exists now, so you can use Hidden Power Flying as some form of fighting stab and a good physical attack, but this is not a great option in a metagame dominated by so many flying resistances, especially Zapdos, Raikou, and Skarmory. And speaking of Zapdos and Raikou, some of the top Pokemon in this game, seen on most competitive teams, are electric types that are faster than Gyarados. How can you justify running Gyarados when it is threatened with a one-hit KO by some of the most ubiquitous presences you can imagine? It also does not help that Gyarados is struggling even more against Snorlax, who, with the power of Leftovers and Rest Talk, is erasing any possible progress you could make with your attacking move pool. Hyper Beam is no longer an option that matters, so you don't even have the breaking power of that to rely on anymore. Gyarados is a very unfortunate Gen 2 Pokemon. It's almost hard to imagine Gyarados without the options that would come to define it, that it was given in Gen 3, those being Dragon Dance and Intimidate. These 2 additions made Gyarados so much better, and made it functional for the first time ever. It feels like it should have always had these. Early Gen Gyarados is a very awkward Pokemon that looks good on the surface, but just doesn't really do anything. So I'm glad that it got the buffs it did in the very next generation. Another top tier Pokemon that had pretty terrible beginnings was Azumarill. Azumarill is most associated with Generation 6, where it got buffed significantly. This is where Azumarill was upgraded from a mere mono water type into a water fairy dual type. Gaining this new fairy typing was a significant increase to its viability, and with its excellent ability Huge Power, which just doubles attack, Azumarill is one of the most frightening physical threats in existence. Despite only 50 base attack, Huge Power allows Azumarill to achieve incredible amounts of attack thanks to bonus stats from EVs and nature. Azumarill can make up for its low speed with Aqua Jet, and this Pokemon can either be used with a straightforward Choice Band to just hit like a truck immediately, exuding immediate offensive pressure, or it can run a Belly Drum Citrus Berry combination. And with maxed attack and Aqua Jet for priority, Azumarill is an incredible late game cleaner. But absolutely none of this was true back in Azumarill's debut game, Gen 2. In fact, in Gen 2, Azumarill was atrocious. This Pokemon was just a mono water type, and what's worse is that it had no ability whatsoever, so it just had these stats and no ability to offset them. What a recipe for disaster. Azumarill is of course far worse than just about any other bulky water type in the whole game. Vaporeon obviously has it beat, Suicune, even Feraligatr, even, dare I say Seadra. Dare I say Seadra is a better Pokemon. Azumarill resides in the unimpressive NU tier of Generation 2, where it exists as a simple rest-talk reliant bulky water type that is just an unexciting version of so many other Pokemon that exist in the game. I think this is why they ended up giving Azumarill huge power in the very next generation, because they saw this useless Pokemon they had created and they thought, what have we done here? Why don't we breathe some life into this fellow? Why don't we give it huge power to double its attack and let it achieve things? Let it be somebody. So Azumarill now had this outstanding ability that lets it achieve some of the highest damage output in the game. But Azumarill was still not loving life in Gen 3 because it is a water type, and this is before the physical special split existed, so Azumarill didn't have any physical stab moves. For this reason, it is kind of outclassed by Medicham, who has the same ability but is a physical attacker with actual stab options and good attacks. Azumarill, on the other hand, is slow, not bulky, doesn't have Aqua Jet, that's not a move, and if it was a move, it wouldn't be physical. So Azumarill is still struggling. Azumarill has some stuff going on though. It's got the combination of Substitute and Focus Punch. That's fun. That can hit really hard. And it has some interesting utility. The guy has Encore. That's something that Medicham does not have. And it's a powerful utility option, forcing the target to repeat themselves. This can give you the free turns required to get the Sub-Punch combo going and perhaps cause some real problems. Hidden Power Ghost can be complementary coverage too. You also have Sing, which is a sleep-inflicting move. It's only 55% accurate, but hey, if it hits, you can start sub-punching. It's like a really bad version of Breloom, but it's still a version of Breloom that is a water type instead, and that's at least comedic at the very, very worst of times, wouldn't you say? I've tried Azumarill in Gen 3 OU. It's a bit more functional than you'd expect, actually. It's probably not as good as almost any other substitute attacker, like a Rhydon would be better, or a Sub-Punch Tyranitar, or a Breloom, of course. But it can do okay if you really want to. If you really, really want to. Azumarill ended up in RU in this generation, which is definitely about right. Now, Gen 4 is where Azumarill got all of its good stuff. Because the physical special split happened, you now have Stab Waterfall and Stab Aqua Jet, which is the whole thing with Azumarill, isn't it? Still not good enough to be OU though. This guy's UU. The Aqua Jet is powerful, but locking into this is pretty easy to stop. Azumarill is still slow and predictable. The belly drum set is not quite there. Azumarill has a bit more reason to exist in Gen 5, where Permanent Rain is a concept, and alongside a Politoed, Azumarill can just ignorantly click Choice Band Aqua Jet and run away with games in the right situation, but there are much better Rain abusers that do similar stuff, like Keldeo and Gyarados. I have seen this Pokemon from time to time in Gen 5 OU, but definitely not on the upper echelon of Rain abusers. So it would take until Gen 6 for Azumarill to really push through into actual viability and becoming a commonly seen presence in competitive. With that additional fairy typing, the move Play Rough, Azumarill could finally thrive. I think it's kind of funny, someone must really like Azumarill over at Game Freak HQ, because it started off as just a garbage, low-tier Pokemon with nothing to offer. And then in every single game, they keep buffing it and buffing it and buffing it, until eventually it became good. The disparity between how it started and how it ended up is kind of insane. I mean, if someone liked Weedle this much, Weedle could be top tier in a few games if he just kept going. There's persistence here. There's a real struggle going on. In every single game, Azumarill is becoming a better version of itself, and I admire that. I think that shows tact, it shows resilience. So there you have it, folks, the awkward early life of top tier Pokemon. Not something people really look back and reflect on much, but I think it's interesting to consider this history, and suppose it says something about the iterative design process. Some of these were very abrupt rocket ship level bursts into viability, like with Clefable, who was pretty bad and then became incredible just by giving it an overpowered ability. That'll certainly do it. But some of these were iterative things, like Azumarill, who started off terrible and gained one new good thing in every game, eventually leading to it becoming viable down the line. There are definitely way more of these I could talk about if you are interested in a part 2. Let me know down below in the comments, and thank you for watching.